My mother-in-law had told me to talk to her about anything that was bothering me before bidding me goodnight yesterday. My mother-in-law had also called me a murderer, among other things, and told my daughter that she was good for nothing a few days ago. I have a feeling that she's putting on an act, but I can't be entirely sure. I, 33F, had lost my husband, 43M, in an accident 2 months ago. It was a big shock to me and my children. We had been making a few plans for his birthday, which was coming up. After a while, I came to terms with my loss, which wasn't easy. But I had my children to think of, and they needed all the support they could get. This was the main reason I had even decided to let my mother-in-law, Christine, 63F, live with us after Ian's death in the first place. Christine and I have never been on good terms. My husband Ian would always tell me that it was common for mothers to be the way Christine was. I kept a lot of what happened between me and Christine away from him because I didn't want to upset him or cause any problems, but I strongly disagreed with his logic. That woman had tried to kick me out of the house multiple times when Ian was absent, and she threatened to take my children away from me because I wasn't fit to be a mother. Christine hated my guts for some reason, and the one time I asked why she didn't like me, she said it was because I wasn't right for her son. Her twisted reason made no sense to me, and after attempting to change her mind by being a perfect daughter-in-law, I gave up after realizing that nothing was going to make Christine respect me as her son's wife. She was going to hate me no matter what I did, and I ignored her whenever she was being petty or unreasonable. Unfortunately, her health had started to deteriorate. Christine had moved in 8 months before Ian's death, and I remember that my biggest fear then was losing my marriage. Christine would always complain to Ian, and when that didn't work, she started to plant absolute nonsense in his mind. All that is in the past, but the arguments I had with my husband in those 8 months were not ones I'd ever forget. My children, of course, noticed this, especially my eldest, Adam, 18. He easily saw through Christine's ploys and began to dislike her. I'd walked in on my son arguing with Christine a few times, and he had told me that he didn't want her to live with us anymore. I'm not ashamed to say that I did nothing to change his mind. I was glad that Adam saw the truth for what it was, and was smart enough to keep it away from his younger sisters. After Ian's death and funeral, I asked Christine to move out. I didn't know what to do to raise money for the house, and the last thing I needed was another mouth to feed. But I changed my mind eventually, and asked Christine to move back in with me and my children. Paying a nurse to be with her in her apartment was expensive, and Ian hadn't liked the idea of an elderly home, so that was out of it as well. Despite the trouble that came along with Christine, she did help with the cleaning. She also cooked, claiming that I was horrible in the kitchen. Back then, I found it annoying, but now I leave her to the cooking. My life was predictable after asking Christine to move back in, getting insults about my cooking and cleaning skills, consoling one or both of my children after they'd gotten yelled at, trying my best to calm Adam down, and going to bed with a headache caused by worry. Ian's lawyer came to see me 6 days ago. We had spoken over the phone a few times, and that was because I was in desperate need of cash. I was hoping for some assets to sell or use to my advantage. I'd exhausted a lot of my savings already, and because I was a college dropout and a housewife, I couldn't get a decent job anywhere. My worries were over when I became the owner of a substantial amount of money. Ian had left enough to take care of me and my children for a while. Adam was set to graduate high school. I didn't have to transfer my girls to another school, and I could start up the catering business I had dreamed of for years to help support my family. I told Adam about it, and he was ecstatic. I had thought he would abandon his plan to take a gap year, but he still insisted on it. I didn't press any further, for now, and told him not to tell anyone about it. Christine found out about the money Ian left for me and my children, of course. I'm not sure when exactly that was, but I know she asked how much money I had 3 days ago. She never once cared to ask how I was dealing with taking care of the kids, and even before Ian died, Christine never asked me for money. Then, why did it have to be after my meeting with the lawyer? She started acting more humane than usual, complaining less than I was used to, asking what I needed help with, and calling my daughters to stay with her in the living room. Adam ignored her, and I shouldn't have been surprised. In fact, he was the one who told me he believed Christine was putting on an act. I don't know how right he is, or what I should do about the situation if his hunch is correct. Do I just act like this change doesn't bother me? I thought of confronting her and asking what exactly she wanted the money for, but it would be better to just move her back to her house and resume paying for a nurse. Or is that a waste of the money I had only recently acquired? Update 1. Adam was right about his grandmother. She really only cared about the money Ian left in his will. so I made sure to cut her off from the family. It wasn't easy, but nothing with Christine ever was. I had spoken to Christine about moving out. It was better for me and the children, and she would have the care I apparently couldn't give her, provided by a nurse. She was against the idea at first, gently telling me that she was happy living with me. I brought it up a second time and got similar results, except that there was some argument involved. I decided to drop it at some point. She was being tolerable after all, and I hadn't had any problems with her in days. That was until I went out 4 days ago. I'd already started making calls to those I knew about my new catering business, and a friend of a friend had told me she needed someone to help with a few homemade snacks for some guests she was receiving. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. After leaving to get supplies, I returned to the house and discovered that a few things were misplaced in my bedroom. After some thought and confrontation, I had no doubt that Christine had gone through my things while I was out. She didn't even deny it when I asked her. The audacity of that woman. She refused to tell me what she was looking for, and I couldn't find out what it was because she hadn't taken anything in particular. She just messed up the entire place. But the few papers I had in my room were obviously searched through, so she was probably looking for some documents. That wasn't really my concern at that moment, though. As long as nothing was missing, I could always come back to address what exactly she was doing in my bedroom. I had to work hard on building up my business. I had successfully delivered the snacks and gotten another gig. I thought of making a few business cards and giving them to my neighbors and my children as well. I spoke to Christine about moving out again just yesterday. This time, I told her I needed space to myself to work on my cooking since I was looking to make it profitable. To my surprise, Christine told me she wasn't going to leave the house anytime soon. She suggested helping me out with my cooking, but I declined, which angered her. Christine told me I had 2 options to pick from, letting her stay and help out or letting her stay and be a thorn in my side. It was clear to me that getting my mother-in-law out of the house wasn't going to be an easy feat, but my resolve to kick her out grew after talking to my youngest daughter. Adam usually picked her up from school but had something to do after school hours. Susie asked me why I wanted Christine out of the house. I learned that Christine had been telling my child that I hated her and wanted nothing to do with her. Susie expressed her disappointment in me, saying that her grandma needed to be taken care of and had to spend time with her family. I told my daughter that Christine was only kidding when she said all that, but inside, I was fuming. Was that why she suddenly became close to my children? To plant lies in their heads and turn them against me? I wondered how I got any sleep that night. Adam and Cecilia, my first daughter, noticed my mood when they returned. Believe me, I tried hiding it from them, but it was pointless. After making an excuse, I retired to my bedroom, asking Adam to handle everything else for me. Why on earth would Christine do something like that to me? All I did was suggest she move out of the house because she would cause me fewer problems and would be taken care of better. And I did that out of respect for my husband. But she was taking things too far. I believed there were certain things that should be kept away from children, and I would not sit back and watch as Christine played games with me and my children. I'd wanted this to remain a family matter, but not anymore. This morning, after the kids had gone, I had a one-on-one with Christine. I told her that she was going to move out of the house, whether she liked it or not. I'd made arrangements for her to move into her former apartment, which was thankfully unoccupied. Christine said she was not going to move out, and I reminded her that she was in my house now, since everything was left to me and the children. I also advised her to go without me forcing her out, which would come with me cutting off some of the expenses I was obligated to pay. Christine called me all sorts of names after I'd made myself clear, and I ignored them all. As long as she moved out, I didn't mind showing my true colors and being heartless. She was gone before the children returned, and I told them that Christine had decided to stay by herself for a while but would visit soon. I hated lying to my children, but it had to be done. Adam, for one, was happy, though he didn't exactly believe me. The girls were a bit sad, but I'm sure they'll get over it. Finally, the huge weight that was my mother-in-law has been lifted off my shoulders. I'm going to pour all my attention on my children and my work from now on. Update 2. I knew Christine was going to cause trouble at some point. I just didn't expect it to be so soon. A little over a month after she left the house, she came back, promising to cause problems if she didn't let me stay in, and I quote, her son's house. She was making a scene outside, so I let her inside with the intent to calm her down and ask why she came to my home. Christine told me that she was here to stay this time and that no threats were going to chase her out of the house. I didn't know what to do then, honestly. Perhaps I was a bit baffled by her audacity, but I remained quiet as she ranted and insulted. Then she said something that shocked me. My mother-in-law told me that she was sure that I had coerced Ian into leaving everything in my and my children's names without considering her at all. She told me that she was going to prove it, even if it meant going to court, and she promised to take everything Ian had left away from me. I understood her surprise, if I'm being honest with myself. I was a bit confused when the lawyer didn't mention her in the will, and almost asked him but decided against it. Ian must have had his reasons for removing his own mom out of his will. Or, and this was my best guess, he never imagined his mom outliving him, especially since she wasn't in the healthiest condition. Still, nothing could be done about the will. And because I was too empathetic for my own good, I let Christine stay the night, promising myself that I would make her leave the next day. My son wasn't too happy with my decision, but after telling him that Christine staying with us was temporary, he calmed down a bit. Cecilia and Susie were pretty happy to see Christine, and I wasn't too glad about that. She was their grandmother, but she wasn't a good role model or a good person overall. I was presented with another problem this morning. Christine was having an argument with Adam, and my daughters were looking terrified. I got in between them and asked what happened, only to find out that Christine was asking Cecilia if she knew anything about Ian's will. Adam, who was in the kitchen, had overheard them and told Christine to stop with the questions, only for Christine to yell in his face and shut him up. I tried to calm him down because I knew Adam well and could tell he wasn't going to let things slide. Eventually I succeeded, but Christine wasn't done. She told me that she was going to kick me and my wayward son out as soon as she was able to prove that I had tampered with the will. And that was when I had it with Christine. This was yet another time when I tried to be a human being, but it backfired. How dare she say things like that to my children? I was so pissed, I didn't bother changing as I ushered my children out of the house, driving all 4 of us to a court to fill out forms for a restraining order. After that, I dropped my children off at a cafe and then left for my house. I told Christine what I had done, then told her that her staying in the house wasn't going to matter when she got the restraining order. And with that, I abandoned her in her bedroom. I heard her leave after half an hour, and I was glad she at least had the common sense to do so. Christine was just an empty barrel with no spine when she was faced head-on, and I managed to have peace of mind for an entire week until Christine started calling excessively. I ignored a lot of her calls and had even blocked her at some point, not in the mood for any of her drama. But then she moved to the landline. When I took the call, it turned out to be the nurse taking care of Christine. She was sicker now, and I was advised to take her to the hospital because her blood pressure kept rising. At first, I thought this was another ploy to get me to take Christine back into my care. But just in case, I went over to Christine's and after taking her to the hospital, found out that it was all the truth. And for the first time since I met Christine, I felt true pity for her. The doctor that attended to her had told me that she needed to be hospitalized for some time and also needed attention 24/7. Christine also didn't have any health insurance, and after being told the estimated cost of her treatment, I was in a dilemma. I'd taken out a substantial amount of the money left by Ian to secure my children's schooling, including Adam's and Cecilia's college fees. Then I planned to use the rest to build my business. It was slow, but it had promise, thanks to my neighbors and Adam's connections. If I used that money for Christine's treatment, I would be left with little to nothing to take care of my family. The only other option was to take out the money I'd already reserved, but I don't know if that's the right move. What would you do in my shoes? Christine, annoying as she is still Ian's mom and my children's grandmother. Plus, I'm the only one who can take care of her. I'm so confused, and I don't want to make decisions in haste. Update 3. Thank you all for the advice you gave. I realize it's been a pretty long time since I updated, but I'm happy to say I found a solution to the problem that was my mother-in-law. I had talked to Adam about this, wanting his opinion on what move I should take. He was surprised when I told him Christine was hospitalized, but he told me he wouldn't pay her bills if he could avoid it. When I asked why, he reminded me of the trouble that Christine had caused in my life and the ones she would most likely cause when she got better. I was a bit shocked that my son could say such things, and he said he wanted Christine to get better but wouldn't be so bothered if he was in my shoes. So even after my conversation with Adam, I was still as confused as ever. On one hand, I knew I couldn't just abandon Christine. She literally depended on Ian, and that responsibility has been passed to me. On the other hand, she didn't exactly deserve my kindness. Besides, how was it that I was the only one who could get her out of the predicament? After a lot of thinking, I had a discussion with the doctor the next day. I agreed to pay a part of Christine's fees and then asked to speak to her. She looked like hell when I saw her, but I wasn't about to let her appearance change my mind. I told Christine that I didn't want to pay her hospital fees, but that I would pay a huge part of them if she agreed to leave me and my children alone. During one of my deliveries as a caterer, I'd overhear a client talking about a home she planned to put her own mother in. It was in a nearby state, and after doing some research, I decided that Christine was going to live there as soon as she got better. I gave all this information to Christine, and for a while she didn't say anything. At that moment in time, I thought she was seriously considering the idea and was happy about it. Christine began by lamenting about Ian's death, saying that Ian wouldn't have hesitated to take care of her if he were alive. I was about to remind her that she gave her son preferential treatment, but she started with the insults again. Even on her potential deathbed, she still had no regard for me as a person. Christine demanded, that I settle the bills since it was Ian who had made the money. I told her that it was my money now, and that she wasn't being reasonable by being stubborn. The insults resumed, but I was used to them. Insulting people was most likely just a hobby of hers. There was nothing Christine didn't try. She attempted to emotionally blackmail me by using my children and Ian, but she should have known that I wasn't going to budge. I had almost left her to her fate when she called me back, agreeing to my conditions. She couldn't come near me or my children due to the restraining order anyway, but this was Christine. I couldn't afford to take any chances. Christine was discharged from the hospital after 9 days. The doctor asked me to watch her all the time, and I nodded while walking away with Christine. She stayed with me and the children for a week, and when I was done with the arrangements for her to leave, she left without any problems. Back then, I felt a bit guilty. I had seen some sadness in her eyes when she left, but I wasn't going to turn back on my word. Besides, it was too late now. I had been married for almost 2 decades, and she decided to treat us as a family for once. That was no longer my problem anyway. I made sure Christine had gotten the rest of the deposit I'd given to her landlord, thinking I'd be able to keep her for a month. I urged her to keep the money for herself, telling her it was for emergencies. I also informed Christine that I wasn't going to be responsible for settling her finances anymore. When I asked if she would like us to visit, she laughed maliciously and said no, then turned her back to me. I was more than happy with her reply. I just had to figure out an excuse to tell my children when they asked any questions about their grandmother. They thankfully didn't. The few weeks I've had with Christine being MIA have been good ones. I checked up on her a few days ago. I owe that to Ian, and she wasn't sicker than she was. Adam had told me he needed help figuring out what to study in college, and as someone who didn't really go to college, I don't exactly know what to tell him. My mini catering business is going well, and me and my children are happy. Hopefully, there won't be any serious obstacles in our future.